Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And again, we want to welcome Alex from Canada, who has spread the knowledge of the foundation from Brazil to Mexico to Europe to the United States and beyond. So we're very appreciative to have him here, and let's thank him through our souls. We don't have to have a physical round of applause or anything, but we do appreciate your presence, Alex, and your teaching and what you're going to bring us today. So thank you very much for being part of this process.
And thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing us to this point, and I want to thank all the members today who are part of the North American Teaching platform here. Remember that we're transcending over 6 continents, and so it's the other continents which make the North American continent so strong. And so I appreciate all of you for being here, whether it's today or sometime in the future if you're listening to the recording. And let's begin, because we have lots to talk about with respect to the Keshe Foundation, teachings of Marin Tevakoli Keshe. And this is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute, Teachings on Plasma Science. We're at the Advanced INNERSPACE session. We're going to discuss the soul of inertia. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is March 26, 2023. This is the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. It's called the Advanced INNERSPACE Series, but it's really very basic in advanced series. And all of these advanced series, whether it be teaching, understanding, knowing, insight, or the Earth Space series, they're all basic. And so we've been plodding along here so that we can have a better reference point, because when you're breaking new ground, when you're pioneering, you need a reference point. How can you have a reference point if it's something that's new? And so it's very common for us to want to gravitate to a reference point that we know in terms of physicality. We're not talking about that today. We're talking about the soul of inertia, and we want to really be specific, because we're all looking for peace. And it's interesting that this week, as part of the North American teaching here, we have 2 of the 3 leaders in North America getting together and sharing their piece of the peace pie. And we're all looking for outer space, aren't we? Because we think we know what it is, except that we only dwell on this one little piece of outer space. It's very stable. It's our little pie in the sky, but it's a small pie, very small pie. And if we want to understand better how to navigate through this universe, we have to explore deeper into the 3 books plus other books. But for now, we have the 3 books: The Universal Order of Creation of Matters, The Bringing Together of the Plasma Fields. So let's understand that the bringing together of these plasma fields is a form of inertia. And so when we look at the origins of the universe and we see the divergence of 2 souls created from 1 soul, when we see the man's universe and the sister universe, this action is gravitational. And so we also have an inertia field there. And then the link between the two, as outlined in book number 2, The Structure of the Light. Well, that link is a field force. And so being a field force, it is an inertia field. And so we need to clarify what we mean by an inertia field. Because fundamentally, when we bring all these fields together as outlined in book number 1, that's not enough of a reference, is it? Because until you reference it to something, then you really don't know where it is. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for references, relationships, and inertia fields. And so fortunately for us, the planets have done that before we got here. We need these planets because you can't get here if the planet is not there. Sounds kind of redundant to say that, but you know, the planets had to go through this and position themselves. And so we find out that each planet is part of this soul family, the soul family of planets. And how do these planetary soul families communicate? And so we find that when we're looking at that position, which we call the emotion of position, and that emotion of position is an inertia field, but it's one small spot in that field because we're actually immersed in a sea of emotion of knowledge. And so that field is way, way larger than that emotion of position. It's a sea of emotion of knowledge. And each of these fields have their own position. But since all of the planetary positions have their own field, in order to participate with the sun space, these fields have to overlap. And then we didn't just pick one place randomly. We were very specific. We wanted to come to Earth space because it was welcoming. Or was it calling? Or were we assigned? Well, whatever it was, we have to make some kind of reference. Because when we're looking at how things move between a launch field and a landing field, there's an emotion, emission. There's an emotion absorption. And there's an emotion creation. These emotion fields, which we've been talking about, are fields of inertia because they come between 2 reference points, which we talk about, this launch field and this landing field. Up until now, when we've been talking about the fields of inertia, it had to do with physicality. So the manifestation of the emotional field also needs a reference point in order to manifest into physicality. And so we'll see the differences as a result of that. See, because fundamentally we've been talking about 2 forces coming together. And of course, we want to refer everything in terms of time because we have a history, we have a future, we have a present. But the thing is that these forces are constantly in motion, and they have a common denominator. And not one is enough. You need more. So we say, well, let's bring two together. And is that enough? Well, conceptually, that's enough. But when you bring those two together, how do you retain it? Well, you have to supplement. You have to keep giving. And so it isn't just giving random. You have to be specific. So you have to keep giving. But the thing is, if you give once and then you give again, you can't give the same thing. And so the difference in terms of motion, on Earth we call it time. Because the difference between one and the difference between the other one is time. And so we can measure that in terms of physicality. And so we say, well, a definite portion of matter occupies a definite part of space at a definite moment in time. And so another portion of matter can also occupy a definite part of space at a definite moment of time. But the one and the same energy, which constitutes a charge, cannot be at two adjacent increments of time. If it were, then there would be no flow. So the fact that there is a flow means that energy is in motion. And since there's a charge on that flow, it means that there's a connection. So in addition to time, we want to measure our distance. But our distance in terms of how these forces come together is variable. Can we see these effects? Can we notice them? Do we account for them? Or maybe we discount for them? And so we find that distance really becomes irrelevant when you're traveling through outer space. This again becomes a physical measurement guideline. And so we've used the speed of light as a foundation for our physics. And we see the relationship between time and distance and the speed of light. And we said, well, this maximum speed of light is constant. But did we qualify that and say that speed of light at a certain field strength is constant? And in the terms of the Earth space field strength, it is visible. And so the problem with this is that there's more than meets the eye, really, because what you're looking at is not you. There's a term of reference, but distance and time are not part of that. And so that's the limitation of the nuclear physics. And we're transcending that with the plasma science, because it takes into consideration this unseen part, which we call the creation of inner space, man space, and Earth space. This non-visible, non-tangible field strength, which we call the ethos of the universal community, which involves morality, compassion, and courage, none of which you can grab onto. It's like a battery. You can grab onto the battery, but the energy inside the battery, you can't grab onto that. And so we only grab onto things that we can grab onto. And each of these things that we grab onto is a field of inertia. And that's all we grab onto, isn't it? but there's more. And we find out that when we want to conquer outer space, we have no proof of outer space. The only thing we have is proof of inner space and inertia space and sun space and planet space and moon space and that in-between space. That we can conquer. But not really, because we only have a small piece of that pie, don't we? So there's nothing to brag about there. But there is something to brag about our preference and sentimentality choices. The choice was to come to Earth, and we chose to be born by coming to Earth. And we were born by choosing the outer space system. But the reference had to do with the inner space, our inner space, the Earth space inner space. And the target point was Earth space. And the Earth space and our space is the inertia field. That's what we're discussing today. This is a pretext to the plasma flight tests to go to the moon, which will be starting very shortly. We're going to have to do that by traveling through outer space. And so there's a relationship between the Earth and the moon. Well, that's fine. But we haven't found our outer space yet. The only relationship we have is with the scientific community, which understands the conservation of energy. But we have to expand that to understand the relationship between the magnetic and gravitational field forces, which contribute to the balance of field strength, which we call a maggraph. And so by extension, the maggraph field becomes a field of inertia. Because an inertia field is a relationship between one field and another field. And so it creates a field. But is that field the sum of the two fields? And when we say 1 plus 1, are they the same one? Or are they another one? And do we know how strong the field is? And so we have a limitation in the scientific understanding, and it's compounded with the limitations in the spiritual understanding, because the only thing that we're looking at is the motor of the soul, which is the spirit. But we don't understand, shall we say, the mechanics behind this soul, behind this motor of the soul, because the mechanics are non-visible, non-tangible. And so this is where the plasma science adds to the knowledge. And so our challenge is to effect a change, but at a rate of change which is graceful. And can we do that? Will we be allowed to do that? It all depends on who's doing the allowing. So we have choices. How do these forces come together? So we find that if we look at the universal harvesting of energy, it's self-enhancing. But if we look at the earthbound loose harvesting of energy, it's self-consuming. So our relationship then is the difference between when we're looking at some source to the individual you, or we're looking at the individual in relationship to some other individual. And seeing as the source is part of the universal energy, and we are part of the earthbound energy, we are of the lower field strength. So if we govern our relationship by the universal source versus some other individual source, which is of a lower energy, we can start to see where the problem lies. It's not just our point of view, but our terms of reference. And here we are consciously trying to understand our terms of reference, but we've already made that choice unconsciously. We saw the planet we wanted, we chose it, and we came. Just because we don't remember doesn't mean it didn't happen. And so if we can't explain it, the one thing we can explain is that energy needs to be bound into a field, and that's part of the inertia field. But do we have to feed this field at the expense of others? And seeing is that's what we're seeing. And seeing is what we're not seeing is out of sight, out of mind. We can understand why that choice was made. But when we look at the results, we find that the results are less than satisfactory. I don't think that's debatable. And when we look at our intelligence and we compare that to the intelligence of the Earth, and we look at how the Earth is constructed, where we live within this magnetosphere, which is the range between the magnetical field forces and the gravitational field forces of the Earth, and we're there in that biosphere range, it's very stable. It's very welcoming. And so there must be some kind of effect that is causing all this to happen, and it's unseen. And so we see that not only do we have a soul, but the Earth has a soul. And since the soul of the Earth is in the core, then the soul of the Earth body is in the P stone. And yet the Earth doesn't have arms and legs, and we do. But what we do see is that in our cell structure, the cells have a magnetical gravitational relationship. And so that is very, very similar to the Earth's structure. And in both cases, we have a gravitational stability. So if we compare our cell structure to the Earth structure, we've resolved this anomaly. Our body is made up of trillions of cells, and the Earth structure is made up of even more than trillions of, shall we say, grains of sand, or maybe be more specific, atoms. And so if we're trying to understand the physicality, we have to understand where that came from. And we've had an opportunity to go through all the family of emotions that are within our current knowledge at this point in time. But the fact of the matter is that from ManSpace's point of view, our physicality is dominant. And what we're doing today in terms of our presence is dominant. And so as such, we have to reinforce our position. And our position needs to be reinforced. And so it affects our vision. Are we sure that what we're seeing is what we're seeing? And so really the reference that we have to lean on is that soul space point of view, which is the emotion of knowledge. And so our emotion of knowledge is connected to some universal energy, and it's working with our soul. And we see our physicality as being a product of that interaction, being our man space. And so we call that inertia. Well, if our man space inertia has a physicality, but is the product of the emotion of knowledge directed by our soul space, then the inertia field also would have a soul. We're just going to go through a little exercise here because, well, actually, we're going to go through two exercises, so let's have some fun. So we've been talking about surface to volume ratios in basic math. And we see that, in simple math, 1 and 1 is 2, but really, when we look at the synergistic math, we find that 1 and 1 is more than 2. And so we can't guarantee that 1 and the other 1 are the same 1, but we can say that those are feeding dimensions. And so when they come together, we need a feedback dimension, so that being the third dimension. And as we witness this and observe what's going on, we realize we can't be either of those three dimensions. We have to be in another dimension, the participant observer dimension, or as accountants like to call it, the fudging dimension. And speaking of accountants, well, this is one of the things that they do. They check for our profitability, because that's really what matters, isn't it? That's what we account for, or what we discount for. And as we see with the, shall we say, the economic situation of this planet, and as we're challenged with food security and energy security, it's a wonder that this is a problem in the age of technology. So have we shifted our confidence from the bringing of these technologies together to confidence in losing? Isn't confidence in losing just a lack of confidence in creation? What happened? Are we having a lack of gravitational stability? And so when we look at what we're creating, which may be a flash or a glow or just that shiny glitter, I'm going to say, well, what we're wanting to do is to blast things up. It's in stark contrast to the bountifulness of the planet, isn't it? But not everywhere on this planet is it welcoming. And those areas, are they genetic defects or what's going on? And so every instance that you're looking at here is some form of inertia, because it's a combination of fields and factors of these fields and field strengths of these fields. And so from our point of view, which of these fields do we account for? Which of these fields do we discount for? And how do we know that our conclusions are correct? So let's have a little bit of fun with some math here, and we're not going to get overly complicated, but we're going to stress a few points. So we have our basic additive math, 1 and 1. And so that gives us a factor of more than 2. But how much more than 2? Because we don't really know if 1 and the other 1 are the same 1. So we can be safe in saying it's more than 2. But if we get into this pure math, and instead of adding, if we multiply, a funny thing happens. If we multiply 1 times 1, that equals 1. And ironically, if we divide 1 by 1, well, that also equals 1. Something strange, something strange. So through multiplication or division, you get the same answer. Well, the only thing that I can think of that is similar to this is cell creation, right? Because cells are created and multiplied through division. So if we're looking at how the cells work, they have one and they multiply with another one, and then they create another one. But there's no consumption. There's a creation. So the two are the feeding dimensions, and the third one being the feedback dimension. And so the third dimension is the field of inertia. Okay, so that's three fields, right? And we're still the observers, so we're in this fourth dimension, right? So what we're finding, we haven't been able to identify which one is one, and are they the same one? So we have to understand that in terms of plasma, plasma exists in different kinds of energy states. So there are higher energy states and lower energy states. And with respect to these energy states, we have to understand our point of view. So we try to understand our Earth space, and right now we're delving into our inner space sequence. And if we can understand that, maybe it'll unlock the key to the gateway to the outer space. And this is pretty important, because what we're talking about is the creation of the universe family. And how is it created? And it's created from energy, as was seen on the cover of book number 1. But as these three come together, and that forms a field of inertia, but it has a charge, so that means it's in motion. So that it has to have a motion to something else. So it implies a combination of energy fields. And it can come to or go from a field. And so that determines the charge. And then the field strength of the charge is determined by the rotation and the speed of rotation. And then that impacts the direction of the charge. But fundamentally, energy is emitted and it's absorbed. And when it's emitted, we say that's magnetical. When it's absorbed, we say that's gravitation. But the energy cannot always be magnetical or gravitational because it's moving and it's changing its position. So in order to change the position, something has to happen. So when we have these plasma rules, which says that energy states can increase or decrease, what is significant about plasma from our ordinary physics is that this is done by at least an order of magnitude. So it would be 10, or 10 times 10, which would be 100, or 10 times 10 times 10, which would be 1,000, and on it goes. And so the basic rule, though, is that the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. Well, how do you know if you're higher or lower? So one of the ways is that we can see how the energy state changes manifest. So one of the ways they manifest is what we call natural creation. But an unfortunate term, natural decay, applies for energy state changes in an opposite direction. And then when we look at the sun, we see that it's catalytic. So it doesn't change its energy state. It doesn't get consumed, but it does emit energy. If it's not going to be changing its state, and it is going to continue to emit energy, then what is unseen is the absorption of energy. And the thing is that we're on a planet which is a lower energy state than the sun. And so the sun is not only giving energy to our planet, but is giving energy to all the planets. So the energy transfer that the sun is giving is not only higher by orders of magnitude, but it's higher by many orders of magnitude. And where's that energy coming from? So this is what we can say, is we can say that the energy state of the sun is an inertia field. The energy state of the planet is an inertia field. And our state is an inertia field. And if we say, well, these inertia fields are physical because we can see them and touch them, it doesn't account for the energy states changes, because it's through the plasma energy which allows the absorption of energy, and also at the same time it's a barrier of energy. And how does it make that decision? How does it account for the different field strength? And so we find that plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe. And at that point in time, we see a difference in terms of what we refer to as an inertia manifestation. So in other words, when these two forces come together, two field forces create a third, that is a field force of inertia. So we're not saying if these two field forces coming together are plasmatic or physical, and we're not saying where. We're not even saying how. And we're not even saying if two is enough. All we can say is, well, two or more. So that means there's different kinds of inertia manifestation. So we could say inertia manifestation of a kind. Well, one kind of inertia is a PM tick, right? We know that a PM tick is the coming together of an energy pack. So the PM tick itself is one kind of inertia manifestation. And as different PM ticks come together, they come together as the principal matter, transition matter, and convergence matter into a plasmagen state, which is a representation of the conversion of all these energies coming together in a maggrav condition, which in itself is an inertia manifestation of a kind. And if that maggrav condition interacts with an environment, then that creates an inertia manifestation of a kind. So not only do we have a feeding inertia, but we have a feedback inertia. And then, of course, the magnetical gravitational relationship is a conversion inertia. Okay, so that's two fields coming together, but are we limiting our opportunities? Are we not taking enough into account? Are we just simpletons adding one and one? What about if we add another one? Well, if we added another one, it would be true that it's more than two. In fact, it looks like it'd be more than three, right? But we don't know if each of these ones is the same one. But we still have this anomaly that if we were to take 1 and multiply by 1, we get 1. And then if we were to multiply it by another 1, we still get 1. And then, interestingly enough, if we divide 1 by 1, well, we get 1. And if we were to divide it by another 1, well, we still get 1. And so, you know, this is kind of confusing. So mathematically, we try and introduce a little convention when we say, well, there's a sequence here. And so you solve what's within the brackets first. So if we say 1 times 1 is 1, okay, so that's one field. And multiply it by another field, well, we're still back to 1. And the same thing happens if we take 1 divided by 1, that's 1, and then divided by another 1, well, it's still 1. Okay, so we have a little convention, but you know, we still have the anomaly. And then who's to say that the brackets would be around the first pair of 1s? It could be the second pair of 1s. Who's to decide? The answer is still 1 when we multiply. And then by the same token, if we decide to bracket off the second pair of 1s and divide, we still get 1. So it doesn't really matter if it's 1 or another 1 or another 1, or a pair of 1s and another 1, or 1 and a pair of 1s. It just doesn't matter. It all comes back to 1. And so each one of these is a field of inertia. And so we've come to this point that we wanted to discuss this core component anomaly. And that is, we see the PM ticks as being like that of an electron. They're magnetical. But then we see the creation of this atomic marriage between the electron and the proton. And so that becomes much more gravitational, isn't it? So one and the other is the same thing, but it doesn't even define if it's plasmatic or if it's physical. And then there's us, we're the observer field. So what we're seeing is a product of all of these fields coming together. Well, that product is an inertia field. But as observers, if we were looking at the product on the right-hand side inside the green box, we're seeing things that are undefined, except for the fact in the first equation, we could say, well, it's more than 3, that would be accurate. But if we multiply things together, well, we still get 1. But then if we divide things, we still get 1. But whatever the answer is, we don't know how it was created. We don't know what factors to take into account. All we see is the field of inertia. What we don't see is on the left-hand side, what constitutes that field of inertia. And then the fields on the left side, are they inertia fields? Or are the fields on the right side inertia fields? Because even on the left-hand side, we don't know which one is 1, and we don't know what the field strength is, and we don't know where it came from. We don't even know if it's the same one. But what we do know is that there's a common denominator, because that's what draws them to these inertia fields. So in simple terms, we could say that on the right-hand side, we have the inertia fields, which is the product of the interaction of the other fields. And we can, in fact, go so far as to say, well, we can see that if it's in physicality. But we can't see the other fields. One of those fields would have to be contributing to the soul of the inertia field. Because the inertia has to depend on relationship. So if you want to know higher energy states or the lower energy states, so we find that these field strengths change. And not only do they change field to field, but they can transcend multiple energy states in one go. And the whole thing is to understand the relationship, there has to be an accommodation. That's the manifestation, the strength accommodation by field relations. So when we look at the Earth space, it's a kind of energy state and is gravitationally stable. In terms of physicality, it's at the lowest energy state level, but is gravitationally stable. While our inner space is a higher energy state, but it too is gravitationally stable. Because the inner space is a precursor for the physical space. So in order for the Earth space and the physical space to be gravitationally stable, we have to have a gravitationally stable inner space. And if that inner space is not gravitationally stable, then it cannot contribute to the inertia field of the maggrav condition between the plasma conversion and the environment, which in this case is the relationship between us and our Earth space. And the unseen hand is the ethos of the universe, and the plasma is bound to that. And that's done on a soul connection. So when we're looking at the gravitational stability of the synergy of these fields, and not to get overly complex, we've just introduced 3 fields. And so we say, well, the 1 plus 1 plus another 1 is more than 3. And that creates a gravitationally stable field. But obviously, we still have all the individual fields, and then we have the combination of the fields. So we didn't lose anything in the process. We have to have what we had to maintain that field. Because like the sun, we have to give energy, and if we give energy, we have to supplement that energy. And if we supplement more energy, then we actually can create. So if we take 1 plus times 1 times another 1, it becomes part of the creation dimension, even though it's 1, but it's 1 in a higher energy state. And then if we decay 1, divide by 1, divide by another 1, we still come up with 1, but it's in a lower energy state. So the creation and the decay dimensions are all part of the creation. And whether it's multiplied or divided by, it's gravitationally stable. And so this is what we have to understand with the plasma science, because we're only up to 3 here. How many fields do we take into account? So just for simplicity's sake, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And so that governs the attraction and repulsion of energies, as represented by magnetical and gravitational field strength, where the magnetical is doing the feeding and the gravitational is doing the feedback. So in order for the gravitational to feed back, it has to be fed. And in order for the magnetical to be feeding, it has to be fed. So we see that there's a sequence, and we have this opportunity to make a choice. And we have to make this choice as if we're the last man standing, because we have to learn how to turn on and turn off this feeding, and to increase and decrease the strength of the fields, because it affects our positioning. And so if we want to enhance or diminish our position, then there's no comment on that. We have to understand the sequence with respect to the feeding and the feedback. And so we've been relying on this inertia feedback with our emotions of vision. And we've used the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth to enhance that vision. And it's helped us in our positioning. And so not only do we position ourselves physically, but our soul gets positioned. And from that position, we can do an inertia feeding, because our positioning is actually a plasmatic symbiosis of a field, an inertia field. If we look at it in terms of the Earth, we find that the binding energy is coming in and more is coming in. Well, it has to come into an inertia field. It has to be absorbed and attracted in this inertia field. And if we want to elevate, it has to go out, and more has to go out. We have to have this inertia field to begin with. That's the MAGRAV field. It is from there that we can do emission and repulsion, and we call that a magnetical force field. And so to balance these inertia fields, we have to have absorption in and emission out. And so this is the inertia field in action. And depending on how the energy is transferred, affects the susceptibility of this inertia field. So inertia field is what it is at a certain point in time and at a certain place. So when we're looking at a protein, and if we remember that this was the basis of star formation inertia, and that protein was created from amino acids, and it had gravitational stability because we had 3 amino acids coming together. And when the 3 came together, they folded over into protein. Well, interestingly enough, to create the amino acid, we had the oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon come together, and with the hydrogen. But we created an atom, which is the relationship of the smaller magnetic field of the electron and the larger magnetic field of the proton. And the two work together. And it's called an atom. And so that's the fundamental principle of the twinity, how those two are coming together. But when they come together, they create a flower. And so that's a star formation inertia of all of these field forces that have come together and offered up a gravitational stability which we can manifest into a flower. But at the end of the season, that flower can change and decay. And so we see how this anomaly goes from this magnetical PM takes to these gravitational rays and back again, where we go from this electron structure to this atomic marriage of an electron and a proton. And so we don't really have to determine if it's plasmatic or if it's physical, because the energy in motion method is the same. And so we're back to this star formation inertia of the amino acid building. And in all cases that we've described here, it's gravitationally stable. So this is why you can't throw anything away, because there's no place to throw it. There is no way. There's Mars, there's Jupiter, there's Earth. There's no planet called away. And so just because we can't see it, we have to identify this vanishing point. But this vanishing point is a two-way street, because this vanishing point is where the transmission and transition of energy comes together and creates this point of existence, which we call transmutation. And it creates a balanced magrav, but it's not visible. Because when it's balanced, it's not visible. There's no energy in motion. There's no energy in motion to take us from the plasmatic reality to the physical reality and back again to this plasmatic reality. So if we say going from one, let's say the amino acid, to the physical reality of the protein of the flower, and then decaying back into the plasmatic reality of the amino acid. So we have a family reference that is coming together at a gravitationally stable point. And then from there, it goes to another family reference. And so regardless of which direction it's going, it creates another field. And that field is a star formation inertia field. And it's gravitationally stable. You can't create a field if it's not gravitationally stable. So when we're looking at these energy packs, they're not gravitationally stable, they're magnetically stable. In other words, they're part of the emotion of knowledge, which is transcending all these reality dimensions. And these feeding packs, they of themselves are stable. They are gravitationally stable. But because the plasma energy is a two-way street, they're able to flip around depending on their charge and the direction that they're going. And in all cases, it would be magnetical. So these energy feeding backs are looking for a gravitationally stable magrav. And when they get there, things happen. And so we see how these core energy packs are feeding us, and they contribute to our feeding vision. And so our soul is positioned at these crossroads, and this position of the crossroads is an inertia field. And if our soul is interacting with those crossroads, then it's going to be interacting with the soul of inertia. So let's look at a real life situation where we have this GANS in a bottle. So the bottle itself is silicone glass. It's hard, it's physical, but it's transparent. That's one inertia field. Inside that, we have the GANS itself, which is an inertia field. Inside the GANS, we have a hole in that GANS. That is an inertia field. And inside the bottle, we also have water, which you see the pattern here. It's an inertia field. And the air inside the bottle, that's also an inertia field. So which one is the feeder and which one is the feedback? So we have to identify the field strength. So clearly, the physical field strength of the bottle can hold against the water and the air inside. And clearly, we have air, we have water, and we have solid gas. And clearly, we have a hole. It's all very clear. So what we're looking at is the core component of this field forces coming together. And as these field forces come together, that is the field of inertia. And so what we've done, we've gone from a lower energy state in the cups of life, and we've created a relationship between the physicality of the copper wires and the nanocoating of the copper wires. And then we've created another one, but this other one is not copper. It's zinc. So one zinc plus one nanocoated copper coil plus another one copper coil. Well, don't forget, we have salt water in there as well. And that's not one, that's salt, that's water, that's 1 plus 1. And look what we get. We get CO2 GANs, calcium GANs, copper GANs, zinc GANs, amino acid GANs, water GANs. All of this coming, well, you know, we said that's, you know, more than 2, more than 3. Well, we didn't say how much more. And, you know, we didn't really consider what to consider, because we only considered what we saw. We didn't consider what we didn't see. But now, with the understanding of the plasma, we understand that there's more to consider, and we can be more considerate. So we have each of these cups that come together, the cup of emotion, the cup of physicality, the cup of the soul, and each of them has a magnetical gravitational relationship. But then each one has a soul, including the cup of soul. And then collectively, these three that come together are representative of man space, and they have a soul. But in order for us to have a space in terms of physicality, we have to have a place, and that place is Earth space. So our space and Earth space coming together creates the inertia cup. And that inertia cup, has a soul also. So now we have 5 cups, and they all have a magnetical gravitational collective field, and they all have a collective soul. So this becomes like a family of souls. So what we're looking at here is a soul, which we don't know which soul it is. But if you made this cup, then that soul has an affinity to your soul. that soul has a connection to your soul. And that soul does not have a connection to my soul in the same strength. But you could give the energy of the plasma water from this cup to someone else by giving it something else which is not present in this cup of soul, which would be the intention. And if it is a good intention, it'll be a feeding intention. And so that feeding intention creates a field. And it's done on a soul level because it's coming from the cup of soul, which is representative of the interaction of your soul with the earth soul that creates this inertia field. And that inertia field has a soul. So now you've created a soul field and interacting it with another soul. And you give the plasma water that carries the soul of inertia. You still have your inertia, but a part of your inertia you can give. And there's the connection. And in order to give and maintain your Magrav condition, you have to absorb. And what do you absorb and what do you repel? So you absorb what you need and you repel what you don't want. But what you emit is what you have excess of. And so if you have excess of loving and caring, and you feed that soul of intention, and that becomes a soul of inertia that you can give. And that's energy in motion. And it's dynamic. And so you see that it isn't just standing there. It is interacting. There's a dynamic plasma interaction. And so our emotion of vision of what we see with respect to our reality is connected to these PM ticks, which are traveling all over the universe, faster than the speed of light, in all directions. And the common denominator is the emotion of knowledge. And if there's an affinity to your emotion of vision, then you will get that knowledge. Oh, so there's a qualification. And that is provided you're open to receiving that knowledge. And so fortunately for us, the earth is open because it has two hemispheres of plasmatic field rotation. And each of these has a star formation inertia. And the two work together to create this gravitational stability we call Earth space. And although these inertia fields are rotating in opposite directions, the physical inertia field rotates in one direction, so we don't get dizzy. The sun comes up every day at on the same side, sets on the same side, day by day. And so we see the soul of inertia is the product of these star formation inertias. So there's a convergence of energy and a divergence of energy, but at the center point, this conversion of energy is the point of inertia. And is this inertia field plasmatic or physical, we can't answer at this point. But what we can answer is that the soul of inertia is the backbone to the inertia field. The same way that your soul is the backbone for your physicality. And so when we look at the relationship of the sun and the energy that it gives from within its inner space is the same as we give from our inner space. But there's a point in that inner space, and that inner space point is the point that we transmit the energy from. And we do the same thing as the sun is doing. And the sun does this plasmatically. And it does that within its field. But as we said before, there are other planets in that field. And it gives to all of them. So there's a family relationship the sun gives to all the planets in the planetary field of the sun space, unconditionally. So where's the condition? The condition is in the feedback. So we have one family reference in terms of feeding radiance. We have another family reference in terms of the feedback reference. In terms of, sorry, the second family reference in terms of the feedback radiance. But the interaction of this dynamic plasma is the reality dimension, because the reality dimension manifests itself. And so between these two family references is a manifestation, and that manifestation is an inertia field. And that's exactly how we handle knowledge in motion. That knowledge is coming to us from some family reference. And from that family reference, we create a family reference. But it also goes back. So we absorb energy to enhance our soul, and we emit energy to enhance other souls. Or to say, take what you need and give what you do not need. Remember to create a barrier for what you do not want. Let's relate this to something really, really basic so that maybe we can have another point of reference. And I've done this in the past where I've referenced a soccer game. And so what you're looking at is a playing field inside a stadium. And we know that when we have these two teams that come together on this field, so there's one team on one side, one team on the other side, what is not determined is whether it's professional or amateur. Because that's not the criteria. You could say, well, the professional team has a greater field strength than the amateur team. But if you ever played team sports, it doesn't matter if you're in the lowest league or in the professional league. When you're playing the game, you're in the game. And that's all that matters. So what we're talking about is this team, and what you don't see are the players. But as a coach, you would see the players. But whether or not it's professional or amateur also begs the question, do you have fans? Do you have people in the stadium watching? is this game dependent on the fans being inside the stadium? So what we can say is that the fans would enhance the experience of the game. In that regard, the fans, which are another team, contribute to the inertia of the game. And likewise, it doesn't matter if it's professional or amateur. So the criteria for this game of inertia is obviously you have to have a team and another team, and maybe you have fans. But if you have fans, then that's another team. The game still goes on. So the idea of the game is not dependent on how many things are taken into account here. Fundamentally, you have to have two teams. And each team is an individual team, but clearly they're not the same team. But as a coach, you have players. And so these are the field players. So your team is comprised of members of the team. And each of these players has a position on the field. But that's not the way the game is played. You don't have the team on one side and the other team on the other side. You'll look at the whole field. And so we divide the field into subfields. So we have a backfield and a front field and a middle field. And then along that, there's a left side to the field and a right side to the field, and of course the center in the middle. So these are little subfields. Well, within these subfields, we can have mini games. A game within a game. But if we look at, from our point of view, and we see on the left side that I have a left back, there's going to be a game with the right wing from the other team. But if we look at it from the other team's point of view, their left back is going to have a mini game with our right wing. And then, of course, what makes the game very interesting is that when we change it up a little bit, and so then it becomes very exciting. And at that point, well, maybe we'll have more fans. So the point of the thing is that the game itself is more than the teams. Regardless of which teams are playing, regardless of which players are playing, regardless of which fans are watching, this game has a soul. And so the point of the matter is that the game is a field of inertia from these two teams coming together, which have two players coming together, but not only, more players. In soccer, it's 11 aside, usually. And then you have the fans, which contribute to the soul of the game. And how many fans? Well, how big is the stadium? And even the size of the stadium doesn't determine the number of fans, does it? The stadium could be half empty, or the stadium could be standing room only. So all of this is governed by the soul of inertia. So that is to say that the soul of inertia and the soul of the game are the same thing. If the soul of the game is between the two teams, and the soul of the inertia is the same as the soul of the game between the two teams. If the soul of the game is a mini game, then the soul of the mini game has a soul of the inertia, and that's the same thing. If the soul of the game is between the teams and the fans, the soul of inertia is between the team and the fans. It's the same thing. So the point being is that none of this determines if it's a game, because it's a game between the team and the team. It's a game between the players, and it's a game between the players and the fans. The only thing that changes is the soul of inertia. That determines your focal point. And nothing, when you look at here, tells you where these players came from, or for that matter, where the fans came from, or for that matter, which country this game is in. That's a whole different field of reference. And so if that becomes important, then you have to expand the schemes of reference, and you have to take more things into account. So you get to choose what you take into account and what you discount for. What's the score? Is that all you want to know? Okay, fine. It's 2-0. Who wins? Oh, well, wait a second. Now you're asking for too much. Okay, so that's part of the problem that we have, is we don't ask the right things. We don't ask for the right things. We don't even know what to ask for. And should we even bother asking? Why should we ask when we can steal it? If the soul of the game is the soul of inertia, then the peace dome is a soul of inertia. It's the coming together of the soul of the community soul and the universal soul emitting the emotion of knowledge. And so we see that range right down to the souls of ourselves, from as far away as the entire universal community. Talk about a range. And so where are you positioned within that range? Wherever you're positioned is your position of inertia, where you can give and take from. And depending on your position determines if you're a leader or a follower. But not only, your source of inspiration matters as well. And so if your source of inspiration is from the lowest field strength, which is the source of physicality, well, then that's what you get. But if your source of inspiration is from the highest field source, which is the soul, then you will get more. But we can't say how much more, because each soul operates at its own field strength. As an example, if we look at the vertical people's family, and they also subscribe to this emotion of knowledge, but all the vertical people have an inertia. They have a vertical people space, and that space is the same across all of them. So that is not the defining factor. What is the defining factor is the inertia of biodiversity is determined by the non-visible soul of inertia. Okay, because if I have a tree or if I have a bush growing in the same environment, how do you determine what is the factor of what is going to grow? So you have to take a lot of things into account. And so we have to expand our understanding and understand that the universe is emotionally normal. And the earth seeks freedom and emancipation. And so we get a chance to choose our existential adaptation. And the choice is really to harvest the plasma emotional energy of the plasma universe soul family. That's the criteria. That's why the proof of pursuit of happiness is a failure, because we're lost. We're lost in space. We think we're in outer space. Man has never launched a rocket into outer space. We prefer to be born with the emotion of knowledge so that we can direct the soul of inertia. We have the opportunity to direct the soul of inertia. So we create a map, an emotional position map, based on the magnetical gravitational relationships of the feeding radiance and the feedback radiance, which are the aspects that connect or guide, shall we say, guides the reality dimension. And so, in order to understand this soul sequencing, we can clearly see that we have been attracted to the soul of the earth, but the soul of the earth had to interact with the soul of the sun. And we found out last week that something was missing. We didn't have this map laid out for us. We didn't understand these plasma dimensions, where one state is physical and the other state is plasmatic. So there's a feeding of a kind and there's a modification of a kind. Which matter state are you dominant in? Are you drawing energy from the higher energy state, or are you drawing energy from the lowest energy state, the physicality? Because all of these interactions, all these matter, plasma interactions are inertia. So when we talk about manifestation, manifestation is actually a form artifact of the plasma feeding. And so we see that the emotion of presence is a form artifact of this energy in motion at that manifestation point, which is somewhere between the launch field and the target field. So in order to understand the difference between the plasmatic reality and the physical reality, we have to have an emotion of position. And that's determined by the reality dimension. So the missing link here is the soul of inertia. So we said that if we increase the field strength, that's creation, and if we decrease the field strength, that's decay. So every soul is non-tangible and non-visible. And inertia is the manifestation of the interaction of these fields. Well, inertia could be non-tangible or non-visible then. But inertia could be physical and visible. So the inertia has a choice, but it's the soul of the inertia which manifests as a product of creation, whether it's in a higher field strength or a lower field strength. And is that it's an interaction that's a two-way street. And so, as we said in the past, if we look at the gravitational stability of the sun and the earth, and we see that they are, following the path of equality, we find that the size of that field is not the equality reference point. It's the interaction. It's the bond which bonds these various dimensions, which we see the bond between the plasmatic spectrum and the physicality spectrum and back again, that crosses this reality dimension, which is the bonding dimension. And so all of these field interactions, they are all fields of inertia. And so the inertia field is a magnetical gravitational combination, a gravitationally stable maggrav. But the inspiration behind it came from the soul. So when we look at the soul of inertia, we have to understand that any manifestation is a manifestation that is part of our search for outer space. But if it comes into the physicality, that's a materialization. And the soul of inertia still guides that as well. So this physical state is a unique state. It may be in the lowest energy state, but it's not something to look down at. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's actually a bonus. It's a benefit. It's a unique characteristic. So all we see is the field interaction, which we call inertia. But we don't see what created that field, the soul of the inertia. So we have to understand that the planet had a soul. And so it's the soul of the earth which came together because of the soul of the sun and the soul of the solar system. So now that we have a soul of the earth, okay, well, now we can attract the soul of the earth body. And this is a good thing because we need the soul of the earth body. I mean, where's the soul family going to come to? So it's the soul of the earth body plus the soul of the earth that attracts the soul of the family of man. And that had to come first before we came. Only one can be first. The rest all follow. So we want to have a party, have to have a place to have a party. So now we have the soul of the family and the soul of the earth body attracts all the soul of the family bodies of man. So it's the interaction of family souls of the bodies of man and the soul of the man which attracts your own soul of the body. So we have a plasmatic arrival, but we'd like to make a physical arrival. So we need this earth space sequence where the soul of the sun body plus the soul of the earth body manifest the physicality of the earth. the physical manifestation of the earth is a field interaction we call inertia. So now that we have the soul of the earth body and the soul of the family bodies of man, we can attract the physicality of the family bodies of man. That's the humanity inertia. So now you want to know why you were born? Because it's the souls of the family bodies of man and the soul of the body, of your body, that allows for the physical manifestation of the body. The inertia of your physicality, why you were born. So we can see that with our man space, there's a soul aspect to it, and there's a physical aspect to it, and there is this emotional connection. But not only. Because the inertia of man space comes from the souls. So we have the soul family, the soul of our body, and we manifest the soul of the cells. And our soul is the guider. So that's the inertia of man space. But what about the inertia of earth space? So we find that the relationship of the earth space is also governed by the soul of the inertia of the earth space. So it's the soul of the inertia of the earth space that has a relationship with the soul of inertia of our space. So that's a product of the interaction. And the missing link, which is the interaction of the soul of the humanity family. But not only. It all depends on what you take into account and what you discount for. You can't make that decision based on the physicality. You have to make that decision based on the connection with the souls. And so to understand the reality dimension, you understand that outer space is not a place. Outer space is a method of energy transfer. Energy transfer is always energy in motion. And so it's manifested by the soul of inertia. And so as we see, the soul of inertia doesn't just mean the soul of the inertia of the manifestation, or shall we say the materialization of the physicality, but the soul of inertia is the manifestation of any inertia of two fields coming together at any field strength, anywhere in the universe. And we've demonstrated that with the cups of life because we've created an emotional field strength with these cups of life. And we've done that in our own homes, regardless of our education, regardless of our age, and regardless of our financial capability. Because man is inherently peaceful. And so the emotion of knowledge is there. We were born with it. And so we have to understand that the earth space landscape is heaven. We came to heaven. And man's space's dreamscape is peace, because we're inherently peaceful. And so that becomes part of the emotion of our vision. And so when we just say that the plasma science is where the soul of the man meets for peace, this is because that's the soul strength of the universe and the universal community. And so whether it's Earth space or Mars space, when we test the flights to Mars, we have to do that with peace in our hearts. Otherwise, we'll never get there. Because we're in the post-December 16th era where we can now make choices between the outer space, the inner space, and the Earth space. And we find that graceful, sweet space that allows us to transcend all these energy fields and fulfill our wishes to transmute. So a couple of days ago, March 24th, was a time for the world leaders to be introduced to the true power of the emotion of knowledge, that knowledge of our soul family. We are the directors of the soul of inertia. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings of Plasma Science, calling all Earth space sweethearts. Make that conscious choice. You've already made that in your dreamscape. There's a world peace treaty, sign it. Sign it with your heart, sign it with a pen, sign it with your soul. Add to the soul of inertia, because that's part of the emotion of vision, which allows the fields of life choices, free from boundaries or abuse. Make that emotion a position map. Use the universal community as your travel guide. We're talking about the earthbound soul family, the gravitational stability and gravitational transformation through our emotion and physicality. Be fed by the emotion of knowledge, because that's a transmutation connection to this manifestation point, whatever that manifestation point is. It will allow us to adapt and have awareness and interact with that inner space emotional construct, and connect equally to the universal broadcast of the inner space of freedom. Because you see, the soul of inertia is the product of the essence of the soul family's morality. So we really have to choose wisely. And of course, we have to dare to dream. The plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the outer space age. And that's the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed the trip all. Thank you so much.
Well, it needs to be continued to be delivered, and you certainly are delivering. I think you've threw me a few curveballs today, and I'm not sure how to connect them. Thank you, Alex, very much. Just want to mention to Anna, your guest arrived and stayed with us for a while, so thank you very much, Miss Molina. I hope she enjoyed her short visit with us. Don't know if you can hear me, Anna. Thank you. Well, we have a few people here with microphones. Let's see if anyone would like to raise a question or a point. Alex, are you still, if you see a colony on the moon by China and they're moving there in a flight system, matter state, are you going to say the Chinese never went into space? Because I think you think of it as the energy dimension rather than the matter state, but now it's pretty much confirmed by Mr. Keshe that they'll be building some sort of structures, not with brick and mortar, as we know, but out of fields. He said, we still have to teach you how to build walls and floors and ceilings and petition off rooms, but will you still have that, even though there'll be no rocket, there'll be no burning of fuels, it'll probably be magrev positioning, but will you still say that man has never gone into space if you see a colony on the moon?
So I understand the intention of your question. The thing about it, though, Mark, is that you're non-specific. You're just saying, Alex, do you have a car? So when you're talking about space, you're not defining the space. You see, because there's a physical space, there's an inner space, there's an outer space. So clearly, you can go to the moon or to Mars through a space. But if it happens to be through a physical space, you're going to need a rocket. But if you're going to go travel through outer space, then you can do this plasmatically. And so that's the choice that we have. Did we know that we had this choice before? That's another question. But let's answer the first question. Do you see the difference between one space and another space?
Yes.
Okay, so let's rephrase the question then. If we see, and so what were you saying? The Chinese community
Yeah, a
wishing
colony.
to go
A
a
colony.
colony.
Yeah.
Okay, so going to, what are we talking about? The moon?
Yeah, let's say there's a colony on the moon or Mars. Are we still going to say man has not gone into space because he traveled in the
No,
matter state?
no, because if you go to the moon, that's moon space. If you go to Mars, that's Mars space. What you're asking about is the method of travel. So in order to get there, you have to go through outer space if you want to get there in a reasonable time, like a couple of minutes.
Right.
This becomes the important point. We are not specific enough in what we're asking for. We're too general and we assume things. So it would be incorrect to say, would man, go into space? Well, you're correct, but you're not specific. So you have to ask what kind of space. So the question then could be, if you say, okay, if man is going to go into outer space, that way he could go to the moon space. Now you want to ask the next question. Will that be a plasmatic manifestation only, or will it go to the next step and become a plasmatic, a physical manifestation, which we call materialization? So in either case, you'd be on the moon space, but you'd be in the moon space in either a plasmatic reality or a physical reality. So let's be specific in your question. So if I may paraphrase your question, can we build a physical community on the physical moon space? And can we deliver through outer space? The method of transfer, the ideal method of transfer with the new technology, is to travel through outer space to dematerialize from Earth space and manifest in moon space. And additionally, materialize into moon space. You see the difference in the question and the answer there?
Kind of.
Well, you're being very honest, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because this is the stumbling point. This is one of the reasons that I've gone into this in-depth discussion and falling behind Mr. Kesh's teachings, because our field of reference has been in the past all physical. And we even have the basic problem of not even understanding what love is. And so we get confused on that, even that basic emotion. And we can confuse love with lust, not understanding that the lust is the physical manifestation of a sexual act, and then love is the joy and the bliss between a harmonious relationship. So there's a difference between the plasma field and the physical field. And the plasma field is many orders of magnitude stronger. And because we don't understand it, we choose to ignore it. And as a result, we are drawing energy from the lowest energy field. What I'm suggesting is that the time has come for us to know the difference and willfully and skillfully choose to draw energy from the higher energy source. So I think many of us here have gone into that session on Friday to meet with the world leaders on a plasmatic level. But that plasmatic level is on a unique, higher level. I want to say unique. It's unique to humanity, where we can connect on the soul level from our physical point. So in other words, we are still on this earth space, but we're connecting on the soul level. This is novel. This is new. This is a breakthrough science. And furthermore, all of us did it at the same time. So it's not something that you do when you go to sleep at night and you do that by yourself and, it becomes a personal, individual experience. This was a collective experience. This was the breakthrough in the science. It's a huge difference. And until we understand the nature of that difference, and if we apply this increased energy state level by orders of magnitude, if we think in those terms, then we can understand the ramifications of this breakthrough technology. And so it may just be a simple thing as to have a welcoming field to develop this plasma science, and suddenly, they leave us behind by 50 years. Because that's the benefit that you get from the synergistic benefit of fields coming together, and coming together at a field strength of orders of magnitude much stronger. There's a consistency to what I'm saying, Mark.
Okay, I probably don't see it. And the same with the inertia. Now, I was always under the understanding inertia is generated from the matter state fields. No matter state, no inertia.
Right.
You're asking us to look at it in a different way, in a way.
Well, the different way is this.
Which, no problem. I'm open to
No, but the thing is,
yeah.
It's going back to, let's say, car. That is not specific enough. So it could be a race car, it could be a go-kart, it could be a, one from Ford or one from General Motors. You just don't know. And so we assume it's a car with 4 wheels and at least a door and a steering wheel. So when we say inertia, well, we just assume, that that's the physical manifestation on this planet. Well, if you were born with the intention of your soul, and that soul was guided here by the glint in daddy's eye and the love from mommy, then that's not a physical thing, but it is an inertia. So it has to be the soul of the inertia. So you say, oh, well, that's a baby there, really. And where did that baby come from? Well, that baby has a soul. Well, how did that soul know to come to this planet? Well, it had to interact with the soul of the family of man. Because had it interacted with the soul of chickens, it wouldn't have come as a baby human. It would have come as a baby chicken. So the soul of inertia is dependent on the souls of the interacting fields. And so if the soul of the interacting field is the soul of the child, plus the soul of the family of man, then the soul of inertia, which is the manifestation of the physicality of the child, is of the same, let's call it flavor, the same field strength. So by assuming that all inertia is the same, or by assuming that all inertia is in the physical manifestation, we have that line of thinking has no accounting for the biodiversity of life on this planet. And it doesn't help when we say, oh, we're superior to chimpanzees, or we're superior to cockroaches. Well, you want to be superior to cockroaches, go right ahead, except that, you can't make one. And they're so tiny and they're so clever. So you can't discount their intelligence. And they eat like we do. They create waste like we do. They go in a direction like we do. They have legs. They have senses. Well, yeah, but they're so tiny. They're not human. No, but they're part of creation. And that creation manifests itself in the magnetic gravitational field forces. And when they come together in the maggrav condition, they have a soul. So, we have a soul of the body, and we have the soul of the cells. Well, it's time to admit that the cockroaches have souls as well. And they have a soul of the body, and they have soul of the cells, because the cells make up their body, just as they make up our body. This is the part of the amazement of this planet and of life. And we discount it. We take it for granted. We disrespect it. We have no right to disrespect it. No one gave us that right. But we were given the right to participate. And so we're not just observers. We're not just the fans watching. We're also the participants. So one of the reasons that you would go to a stadium with the fans, as opposed to watching it on TV if you had a choice, is because now you have an atmosphere at the stadium which cannot be replicated on the TV. Well, so that's an added feature. And so my point is that we are an added feature to this planet. We need to act like it. Back to you.
Okay, no, I was just thinking, if there's no if you want to manifest in the matter state, you're traveling on the energy level. If there's no inertia, which is given off by matter state, then how are you going to manifest yourself in that position physically? I don't think you can. But again, my understanding needs to be enhanced. And I'm
Well-
probably missing more than I'm understanding.
Okay, let me just, really good question. Okay, so creation is where you give, and decay is where you diminish. Or let's put it another way, enhance versus diminishing, right? But it's still creation. It's just creation on a different field strength. So at some point, depending on the relationship, if you want to elevate, you have to draw more energy in, and then you can elevate to a higher level. But if you want to manifest into the physicality, then you have to deplete that energy. The depletion of the energy doesn't make you weak in terms of maggrav, gravitational stability. It reduces your field strength to a lower energy state. This is the key point. We can go in both directions. Am I helping?
Yes. Just to realize how much I need to know or how much there's out there to understand. Again, we're sort of in the nursery in a way, in many
Well,
ways.
The one on the matter, I guess that's what I need to do is I need to pull up that slide, right? And see where.
Yeah, that was always my understanding, that the fields of inertia, no matter state, no fields of inertia. Now, again, I could be wrong. I believe there's
No, you're right.
a soul of inertia. But again, I'm not sure. There were one of the cups on the 5-cup stacker that he didn't refer to it as a soul of physicality or soul of the man. The physicality, was it? The cup of inertia? I don't remember him saying the soul of
Yes.
inertia, but anyway, I need to review that. There's so much knowledge to really get it right. You have to know quite a number of points. That's why I think a lot of this is, some of this is going to be automatic. In other words, when the child makes the wish that the child is cold and wants a jumper and communicates with the mother. Now, obviously, it's on the C14 line of communication in a way, but do you think the child is understanding the movement of neutrons, electrons, protons, and all the rest of it? No, they just fall into their proper place based on the wish, I think, of the person. Or, you know, a baby, how could it even understand? The soul understands the plasma, yes. But physically moving or neutrons, protons, electrons around to make all these connections, I think he's just showing us what's actually going on in principle in a way. But the process actually happens automatically. Yes, the atoms move, the electrons move, the neutrons and protons, they do move, but I don't think it's anything we're doing consciously other than setting in motion this wish or a line of communication or something along that line. The rest of it seems to fall into place to me. And that, of course, is just my position right now based on my understanding.
So, Mark, when you say consciously, the fact of the matter is that you are in your physical being right now. So that's a conscious exercise. But your understanding is not conscious. You know, fortunately, your understanding is unconscious or in your subconscious. And that is what the baby relies on, right? So we've determined that. So if we can, you know, if a baby can depend on that, then we as an adult can depend on that. Okay, well, so that's good, but our desire is to understand that in our conscious ways. And one of the drawbacks is the way we've explained things. So we've put limitations on our understanding, we've put limitations on science, and we've put limitations on our conditions. So what I've tried to show by this slide here is that the inertia comes in different kinds. So the energy parceling unit is a unit of inertia. We don't see how it came together. We just see the inertia, which the inertia is the form artifact. And then when we look at the maggrav, which is the combination of the principal transition and convergence matter, that's a maggrav. That maggrav field is an inertia field. This, when we say the PM ticks were brought together by some fields, in terms of a maggrav, we've identified 3 fields. But now, if we're going to manifest on this planet in physicality, how many fields do we have to take into account? Well, there's our soul. There's a soul of the body. There's a soul of the cells. There's a soul of the earth, the soul of the earth body. There's the soul of the family of body of man, and the soul of the family of bodies of man. I've lost count. What is that? 7 already? And then we manifest into the physicality, and at that point, we have an inertia. So that's 8. And I think I've missed a whole bunch more. So what do you take into account in terms of your understanding? So that the bottom line is this, that the inertia, which we term as physicality, is only one point of reference. The creation of that inertia, just in that example that I've said, was 7 points of reference. But if we have 8 billion people on this planet, then that's 8 billion more fields of reference. And what about the universal community? Don't you think that they play into this thing as well? So that's an unknown quantity in addition. So our field of reference, what we call the inertia, is only one field of reference, that's our physicality. But the substructure for this field of inertia comes from the soul connection. And so the aggregate of all of these souls becomes the soul of the inertia. And that soul of inertia has a kind. And so there's a Mark kind, there's an Alex kind, there's an Ann kind, there's a human kind, there's a tomato kind. All of these things work together. All this is just a way to educate ourselves on how things work. And when we come to the realization that all these things that are happening, that are part of our education, teaches us the overriding factor is that life is for learning, and life wants to live. So we understand that we have to learn more. And if life wants to live and we want to be part of life, then we want to live as well. We've chosen EarthSpace as that living place. We could change your mind.
All righty, let's see if someone else would like to bring something to the table. Anyone would like to fill in the space gap?
See, this is a really difficult subject because I can assure you that in my lifetime, I have never asked these questions.
No, I thought inertia was the energy. If you threw a ball, the energy you put in it to throw it was the inertia. And
Right,
then
me
sort
too.
of runs out, almost like a watch where you wind it up and then the spring unwinds and so on and so forth. So, but it's a field actually given off by a matter state entity, as I understand it. So if you're in a position in space and you want to manifest in the physicality and there's nothing there, I don't think you can manifest in the physicality. There's no inertia to interact with because it would have to come from a matter state
Hallelujah.
entity.
Pardon me while I sing a little bit. You got it, Mark.
You'd have to stay in the energy position. Now, how are these children? He's saying he's going to teach the children how to move their physicality, maybe out of harm's way. But where are they going? I mean, if you're a 6, 8, 10-year-old child, you belong to that family in a way. You're being abused, so you want to remove yourself from that condition. Where do you go, and do you come back, or do they play cat and mouse until the abusers realizes they cannot do that anymore? Almost like putting the hands on the child, but then the child disappears. Then the child comes back. You want to do it again? I'll just disappear again. Is that what's going to happen? Where are they going to go in the meantime? Or just, again, become a shapeshifter, perhaps. They're there, but they're not there. I thought Mr. Kesh said that the soul would be able to move out and take the physicality with it. Rather than shape-shifting, you're still there in the room, but you can't be seen, let's say. But this is a beautiful gift because there are so many in this condition that we don't even see, and it's really not highlighted. Yes, we hear about arrests and so on, but there must be millions and millions and millions of people in this predicament, besides housewives, children, organ the whole lot of it.
So the outstanding part of these ramifications of this new technology are thus. So you know, or you believe, that there are many children in this predicament. You don't have physical proof. So there is something that is causing you to believe that. It's not physical. So that's something that is making that connection is plasmatic. So like we did on Friday, we didn't have a physical contact with the world leaders. We had a plasmatic contact. We made a connection with those who wanted the connection. We made that available to all of them. They didn't want that. Well, the ones we failed to make a connection with are the ones who didn't want that. The souls of the children who are being abused do want that. If we create the soul environment to connect, they will connect, regardless of wherever they are. This is the ramifications of the new technology. He hasn't even announced it publicly. It's just been shall we say, beating around the bush, you know, with it, but it's been clearly demonstrated, particularly, you know, starting on February the 19th with the proof of concept that we can eliminate world hunger. So we take that demonstration, which shows the transmutation of field strength and the manifestation of the inertia through the soul. And we can extend that soul strength to the inertia of physicality as well, because the inertia of physicality is just another field strength. So you pick your field strength, whichever you want. They're all a field of manifestation, and they're all a manifestation of the fields of inertia. It's just that if it's manifesting into physicality, it's materialization. And if it's going from one physicality to another physicality to transmute, it has to dematerialize into the soul state and then materialize back into the physical state. However, if you look at the Magravh condition on the cover of book number 1, you find it's a convergence of 3 different energy states, and they all work together in the same field. And that field is a field of inertia. So the individual fields of the principal, transition, and convergence matter are all part of the soul of inertia. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say, I think they're going to pick up on this rather quickly because of their strong emotion to not want to be in that particular position.
That's right.
So I think they're going to pick up on this and then maybe spread it around the community or something. I know Mr. Kesh said give them a headphone. I don't know how they're going to find the lens system to be able to connect to it. But again, there's probably many things going on where the soul will just find a way to do that. But because of their strong emotion to want to escape out of that condition, I think it'll happen really quickly.
That's right. Yeah. So, you know, we have already the proof of concept because you were born without a headphone. You weren't born with a rocket, and you weren't born with a headphone, okay? So let's get that straight.
Do you want to see some baby pictures with the headphone? No. And as he said, did anyone buy a ticket for their dog or cat? Oh, gosh. I don't think anyone did, but we need to make it available to everyone. So somehow it's going to be able to reach right across this planet.
Well, the good thing about let's say the dogs and the cats is they are tuned into our emotion. So they know when we're, shall we say, not feeling well, or they know when something's wrong. And in fact, sometimes they know something's wrong before we know.
Okay, would someone else like to come in? This is not just a conversation between Alex and myself.
It'd be interesting to know, Mark, how many knowledge seekers that were on the call on Friday had their pets with them.
Yeah, it would be. I don't know if anyone did.
Mine were on the desk, and one of them was on my chest he was on my chest for half the time. Other than that, they were both on the desk.
Yeah, interesting. And you had an open mic and no meows. Or was
no
that
meows?
Cat meow?
No, that was one meow, and they cut me off, and then I told her to go back to her place and sleep, and then she slept. It was okay.
I know Rick said it would be quite difficult to put a headphone on a cat, but Mr. Kesh said you could put him in a box and put the headphones outside the box. Again, I don't know if anyone actually did that, but yes, we'd have to keep quiet. Go ahead, Gail.
No, I was just laughing because I thought I heard some it's almost like an engine noise. So I wondered if the cat was busy purring. You know how they like to purr. That's
Yes,
all.
as he said to Dean, when Dean asked him of all these things we're hearing, is that coming from the system? I think Mr. Sketch said it could be, but he didn't really answer him directly. But apparently the system has a number of chatters going on with it. He said we can, when people come in, sometimes the system will react and put out some sounds. But yes, we do hear a number. Again, it's hard to differentiate whether it's from the system, someone scratching their mic, or again, a cat in the lab somewhere. I know he said there was a cat that comes and visits the laboratory. I was thinking maybe that was, it doesn't live there, but it lives nearby. And I guess the people in the lab do share some of their food with it, with the cat. So I was thinking that was the cat that I heard, but it could have been Randy's as well. No problem. I was just wondering.
Well, if I could add to that, please, and that is that the one meow in 5 hours, that's pretty good. So the whole experience was pleasurable. The cats interpreted it that way. If it wasn't pleasurable, you can rest assured that they would be agitated and upset. So, you know, I mean, if you need more confirmation, I mean, I'm just saying, all of us, no doubt, were hitting some point of peace and serenity as a result of our trip. But the pets would have symbiotically been affected, and that's an important point. They are not generally in the business of lying. They are pretty blunt with their emotions.
I see Dean has his mic open.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Good evening to you all. Alex, thank you for a wonderful teaching again. So my question to you would be, Alex, I don't know what you experienced. However, there were many noises. And one thing I would like to say, when I was, when we contacted the world leaders, there were two that came very specifically to mind and another one. And for whatever reason, I went to their souls, and I noticed one of them was in the news almost immediately, where something happened with a watch on his wrist. And I knew that that soul had been touched. The other one that I spoke to, there was some implication with one of the other ones in the news as well. But the other one, which was with the Canadian leader, not had anything from that side yet. So, but I know that there definitely something happened somewhere along the lines with these souls. And then obviously I contacted Kings and other people that I felt needed this. So as a group and individually as well. And I sensed that I know those, you know, there was some interactions there, most definitely. I've sensed that straight away. And I myself, I explained this afterwards in the meeting, that I experienced going through that sort of, took a long time this time, but however, once I settled into it, I went through that transmutation sort of feeling again, where I had a certain coldness. This was in different places in my body this time. It wasn't in the same place. However, I knew I went through that phase of expanding the soul out to my understanding, and then being in that sort of soul position. And then I explained that I went through another transitional period where it felt like I come back to the soul of physicality. And then I saw this bright white light that sort of went from the right side of my conscious, soul vision across to the left, high up in the left. And then it was like a torch that was pointed directly at you, with a very white, brilliant light in the middle, and then it slightly expanded out, radiated out, and that moved around and then went off screen as such and just disappeared. So that's when I presumed I'd come back to the soul of physicality. It was interacting on that level. So I think there was a definite, it's like the three chairs. It was the physical, the physicality, listening to all the noises and understanding what was going on and being very busy with the body, and then gradually going off into another condition, and then experiencing this expansion of the soul, going through the phases of when you're in that position, and then gently or not gently coming back, and then being in the soul of physicality again, experiencing something else. So there were a few interactions there. And I know it was a very, there were moments of when you expand the soul, and obviously it was in, we were speaking with the Universal Council and all the other souls that are present. And I sensed that was a very beautiful, that was a completely different sensation. It was when we did this, first of all, it was that was just pure essence and love, and just another state altogether. And then when Mr. Kesh asked a question about would the world leaders, asked them what they would want, what would be their questions back to you. And the moment he said that, it's almost like I got this tremendous force, this interaction of pain on my back. And it was like that. And I understood this because I'd just been through like another session with some healers that were using their words and terminology, but we're healing without them even knowing, I think, or maybe they do know, on a soul level. And I was having personal experiences where I was, there were things in my past that I was holding on to, which was through my lineage and my family, of certain manifestations of their passing, and the grief that was involved, and all the other things that you hang on to that you're not even aware of, and you sort of, I have sort of packaged them away and sort of put them in a box and sort of like, don't want to look at that. But then I suddenly found I had to walk through that door. So I experienced that, and I found it was very painful on my back. So then in the very next instance, almost within 2 days, to go into this experience, and then the question was asked about the world leaders and what they would expect. And then it was the same feeling, and even much more intense though. And so I knew, from my understanding of what I've been spoken with others about, that this was a direct correspondence to souls going back generations, or souls that have been present in a certain moment, to my understanding. So it was a very interesting, my experience, what I experienced in that meeting. It was different. So there's some experiences for you.
And the room's going to be open, he said, at intermittent times for us to continue to connect with the world leaders. I don't know if you heard that.
I did, Mark.
Yes.
I did try to go in today. It wasn't open today, so I will. We'll see. I think I will try, and when the moment's right, as we know, the soul will lead us, guide us there, and we'll be there. And I do sense. I've always sensed that it's part of my structure, and I feel the same. This wanting to help and create a balanced condition for all the souls in physicality, and I'm not so much in non-physicality, because I know that that's all a condition that's already balanced. But in the physical form, that there's many things that need to be readdressed, and so I have a great sense of wanting to be present with the world leaders, or anybody. For me, world leaders is a title, is a name. As we all know, you're
just as equal. Yes,
we're just as equal. So all I'm doing is contacting another soul. It's no different to me contacting any soul. So yes, those particular souls that have claim to be in the matter state, yeah, it's very easy to contact them and to give them unconditional love. So this is where what Mr. Kesh is speaking about. When we can, somebody that to our understanding, to our expression and experiences, are creating a lot of conditions that are making others suffer. However, when you can go to that soul, the one that is doing this, and give unconditionally, on a level that is overwhelming, where you literally open yourself up to them for them to experience, the love of the soul, and then when that touches their soul, which it does, which it will, then you become that. You give them the energy they require, and then the soul of their physicality will start to become more peaceful and more balanced. And one thing I have noticed, that many people that are when I see people, when I experience people that maybe need an elevation, if I sense that I can help them, or they, I feel that they've asked me to, or whatever, the ones that are very aggressive, the ones that have caused a lot of the problems, whenever I've done it to those sort of people, some of them have always been the easiest to actually contact, because they have such a field strength of a condition that's so far away from being peaceful, that it's a bit like the plasma. When you first play with the plasma and you first make your systems, there's a lot of interaction for many people, and it's very big. But when you've been in the fields long enough and you've experienced it enough, then it starts to be less, because you don't need it. So in this first instance, when you contact people that have not experienced the plasmatic condition themselves, that at a certain state, then it touches them very quickly and very deeply. And I think with a concentration of the souls present, with the many beautiful souls that were there, with you guys and Universal Council, which the souls are just unbelievably beautiful, giving to these souls that need this energy. I think this balance condition and this energy transfer, this emotional balance that comes back into the physicality, will happen very quickly. And in fact, I know it has, because as I explained, I've experienced this many times before even these flight systems were set up, where I spoke to other souls that were present in certain personalities that were, people would say that they were celebrities or something. They were in the news. But for me, they were just a soul. And so I just contacted them, gave to them an elevation. And I noticed changes within them, within the structure of how it was reported in all sorts of things. So we all have this ability to tap in when you start to interact. And this ability of what Mr. Kesh has given us as a group soul, as becoming one soul, is showing that that direct connection to the creation is once you tap in, it's a one-way street. It's it's very easy for it to be on that superconductive highway. Anyway, that's my thoughts, Mark, Alex. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I know we're just about at midnight, or just a minute after, at least in the European side of things. Would someone else like to raise a point or make a comment, ask a question? That's what we're here for. And yes, I think President Xi has signed the peace treaty with the pen in his soul, and perhaps has physically signed it as well. And this will carry a lot of weight and a lot of influences through the BRICS countries, let's say, I think, once it's revealed. And of course, he'll have the ability to make peace with this new technology being offered. This is another gift in a way. But just as we saw with Giovanni working with Naomi rather than Mr. Kesh doing it, I think we're seeing a very similar thing here, where Mr. Kesh is sort of in the background, but he's giving the Chinese government, and again, they put it, it was a memorandum of understanding that they put in something about it's not in their constitution, but the memorandum of understanding, something like that. So he's letting President Xi, who's peaceful, he said many years ago, he said he's a very peaceful man. So this is beautiful that now it's come back around. I know he was, Mr. Kesh was a bit upset that the Chinese didn't share, but apparently it wasn't the right time. And now it's coming full circle. And I think they're ready to move. That was the answer that I got, Dean, was we are ready. When the world leaders were saying what they wanted to communicate to us, that they were ready. And I asked specifically, I said, ready for what? And they said, to move. And immediately I went to the part of the video in the beginning of my soul took me there to the beginning of the video on formation of the Universal Council, where he said Mr. Kesh said it's time for change to move into the real work of the universe. So I felt very satisfied at that point that the work we did was very positive.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. I think we all sense that, and I think all the souls that are present within this first initial processed batch of souls coming forward are going to create a beauty, an elevation for the certain souls that require. However, can you imagine how this will, once this is realized by more people, more souls, that when many more souls start to come into these meetings, and there will be many beautiful souls that we won't, I don't know of as such. However, their soul will guide them forward, and they will come in, and they may have even more beauty than we possess, and be able to make very big changes very quickly. And we always know that it's the most humblest people. So when it's opened up, where you start interacting with people that have not even had an internet connection, people that and animals and plants and animals that have a different aspect. However, if they are spoken to on a level that they understand and can interact with us, and we can bring their soul forward, then I think that this is going to expand out astronomically. It's going to be just quite incredible, and it will be such a beautiful interaction, so incredibly wondrous that it will take all our breath away.
Yes, imagine if President Xi said to his citizens that he signed the World Peace Treaty, and he's not forcing them, but he would encourage them to sign, and then we'd have the physicality and the soul working together. I think the changes will speed up at that point, because we'll have so much energy. Even though the souls are working together, there'll be some other point that comes into play here, that we start to focus on individual matters or individual countries or leaders, maybe stubborn ones, and we'll provide, or that elevation will be given through our souls for them to move their position, or the soul to move the physicality's position, which is usually the case, I believe. And again, we think we're here, our physicality brought us here, but Mr. Kesh says, no, it's your souls who brought you here.
There was a question I would like to say. When Alex was speaking earlier, there was a few questions I didn't raise, but I should have. Was that if a soul can go into a plasmatic condition, so it's in a plasmatic condition, and it can go to another position and re-manifest itself. And we know that a soul can take different shapes, and we're all part of the same. So all of us have a part of this within us. So who's to say that Mark couldn't go to President Xi and on a soul level, and if President Xi's soul accepts, then Mark becomes part of President Xi, and then interacts on that level, and vice versa with all of us, and many different beings. So this interaction makes me understand how souls remanifest themselves in different positions, and each one of us has a very specific look. However, Mr. Kesha said in the past that there will be a time when we can remanifest, you know, any color skin, anything. So we can all share souls and enjoy the ride, and you know, start to interact on that level. I'm sure the universal souls already know this, and I'm just catching up.
We all are. We're being bottle
We all
fed
are.
at this time.
Yeah. So there's my thoughts. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Alex, for wonderful teaching.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Anyone else want to open up?
Thanks very
something?
much, Dean.
Yes. Okay.
Mark, can I just take this opportunity to thank
Please.
everybody for allowing me to present? It's such an honor to be here, and I'm really grateful because, as I've said, it helps me tremendously, and so this type of teaching, I've gone into an area that is you know, quite novel, and you know, I'm trying to you know, kind of set a path that's kind of easier to follow, but I don't really have a set path to follow myself, so it has to come from another source. And so what I was trying to do with these classes is to formalize the understanding of the inner space, because that is a much better guide, you know, than anything I have. Whatever I've had physically has not been anywhere near as productive, and I would not have been able to do this. So I thank you all for that opportunity, and I hope it's helping you in the same way, without any judgment on how much. It's just we're touching on different points to open up all of these fields. So that's the initiative. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you very much, Alex, for supporting the whole knowledge, the foundation, the knowledge seekers, and so on. Yes, Lisbeth.
Hello, Mark. Hello,
Hello.
everybody. Thank you for Universal Council for all people, all souls, and daily and the last Friday unifying with us for elevate all the governors, not only the governors, but principally the governors and militaries and journalists and whatever it is, because it's right time for change the world. It's right time for peace and justice. Thank you so much, and invite again, unified daily at 9 p.m. Central Time for elevate the all souls. Thank you, and thank you, Alex and Mark, and anybody come today and always Sunday and all workshops. And invite to next Tuesday, because have many testimonies from the last Friday event. Thank you.
Thank you for your fine words.